Hi, I'm Ben Brucato. I am speaking to you on a unusually cold and unusually sunny day in upstate New York. I live here now as I finish my PhD in Science and Technology Studies at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. And I'm also an adjunct in political science at Union College. I'm walking in a place where I frequently walk. It's an abandoned cemetery near my home, and it's an appropriate place, I think, to speak about anarchist studies, because the object of our study is much like a abandoned cemetery. And so I'm supposed to be talking about what is anarchist studies. And I guess a few things come to mind when asked that question. The first is that, like any of the studies, it's a attempt at a supradisciplinary approach in a way that's very similar to perhaps one of the first identifiable groups that did any such thing, the Institute for Social Research, better known as the Frankfurt School. And Douglas Kellner once wrote that it was the vision of Max Horkheimer to do this superdisciplinary study in such a way that united literary criticism, philosophy, and things typically attributed to the humanities with social science research. And there was this idea that philosophy without empirical research was empty, but that science without philosophy was blind. And I think that that's something that's shared among all of the studies that we could speak of. And I think that that's the case with anarchist studies. I think that the attention to the kind of ethnographic, the experiential, the work of anarchists on the ground has informed the more academic and intellectual pursuits at making sense of those things, and vice versa. And like many of the other studies, perhaps mostly something like women's studies or gender studies, the object, anarchism is an object of study, but it also informs the study. So it's looking at anarchism through an anarchist lens in the same way that women's studies is looking at women through a feminist lens. And all these things are kind of obvious, I would say, but that latter matter of looking at anarchism through an anarchist lens is particularly troublesome when we consider the kind of epistemological or ontological positions that anarchism takes one to. And I think that that gets us to where anarchist studies has ended up, because any attempt to pin down or categorize anarchism has been troubled by the anarchic qualities of the methods and the personalities and identities involved in the pursuit of anarchist studies. So we've kind of come to this place now where the object of our study is elusive, and the results of our inquiry is often especially provisional, which is the case in any study, really. Even the most scientific is always producing artifacts that are provisional in nature. But I think that's especially the case with what we produce with anarchist studies. We find that the history, the texts, the canon, if we could even speak of such a thing, is difficult to pin down. And even the practices of anarchists in the contemporary world are equally difficult to pin down. And so perhaps one of the things that anarchist studies has produced is a rather penetrating epistemologically anarchist methodology in the study of texts and radical and revolutionary work that can be replicated, I think, in other studies. But then we end up in this position, much like Feyerabend took us to with his kind of anarchist approach to the sciences, which is that it throws much in doubt. And so we end up with political theories that we would like to rely upon, perhaps some would like to rely upon, that we might like to provide guidance, perhaps some certainty with wielding sets of knowledge as tools to accomplish particular political ends or perhaps intellectual ends. But like Feyerabend did with the sciences, is he took a lot of the certainty away from us. And so we're left with having to grapple with uncertainty and doubt, provisionality. But I think that's a good place to be. I think that that's exactly where we need to start, and probably where we need to be comfortable dwelling and never hoping to get past that. But one, I guess, final thing that I find some optimism in when it comes to anarchist studies is that it does begin and end with anarchism, to the extent that there's a sense of revolutionary or insurrectionary commitments that are central to the praxis of anarchist studies that remain. So regardless of the extent to which we've ended up in a place where our categories are loose and provisional, where our methods are troubled, and as a result, so too are the conclusions that we end up at, we still maintain a commitment to changing the political and social structures to maximize a freedom or a liberation from authority that dwells not only in political structures or in states, but also too in ways of thinking and ideology, in methodology, in scientism, and in authoritative readings of texts. So in answering what I think anarchist studies is, I think it's a particularly liberating strain of interdisciplinary thought that approaches anarchism as a history, as theory, as practice, and it's something that holds some promise in ways that many of the other interdisciplinary fields don't.